I mean, in the end, I didn't tell my mum. My mum found out on YouTube. so
that's a nice way of finding out.
So I think Ali Dawah shared my shahada or something. So, but
he
yeah,
looks like my son.
And do you know what? She was more upset with the fact that I hadn't told her.
I can imagine
rather than the Islam itself.
So she said, tens of thousands of people know online, but I don't know.
So that was.
That must have been an awkward phone call.
It was very awkward.
Was it a phone call or was it?
It was a phone call. It was like, something you want to tell me? And I was like, go through all the list of things I might have done wrong.
Assalamu alaikum, Jordan. How are you doing?
Alaikum salam, Subboor.
Corona.
How are you doing?
Corona type of way of greeting. Yeah. So, Jordan, it's been a while since we last spoke, and today, obviously, we're going to be discussing new Muslims and the issues that they go through. So, just to get warmed up for this topic, I just recently had a call with somebody who was looking into Islam, and it's the standard thing of they're convinced of Islam, but then they're like waiting for a moment, or this type of thing. So, is that something that you went through as well, where there was this sort of?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So for me, I would say I knew I was Muslim. I would probably say 6 months before I took my shahada.
Oh, wow.
So, and I think you end up sort of kicking it down the grass because various things, various worries for me would have been family, social circles, how people would view me. So I think, we delay it as much as possible. So it was definitely something for me, and I've noticed many others as well.
Mm. And do you think it's a kind of situation where maybe because of the society we live in, but because it's still a Christianized society, so people are like, okay, so I know Islam is true, but I'm just waiting for something. I don't know, a dream, a sign, or people have all these scenarios of when they want to accept Islam.
Yeah, I take that point. I think definitely that wasn't the case for me, but I think I've heard other reverts with that kind of story. I think for me it was very much, I need to do 2 years extensive research, because there might be something in there that I don't like. And I actually was actively looking for things in Islam that maybe I can look at it and go, actually, it's not true.
All right.
But unfortunately, the more you do that, the more you'll see it is true. And that was, I reached a stage where I thought, whatever I find, Islam's going to have the answer. So this is just a pointless, and I've got the rest of my life to learn this stuff,
Yeah.
So for me, that was the case. I think the main thing for me was understanding what the shahada actually was itself, that it kind of exceeds all of these worries about, friendships, families, as hard as they are for you at the time. I think when you get the perspective of what the shahada actually is, I think that's when I sort of said I got to do it.
Yeah, and initially it's very daunting, even being around Muslims, let alone leaving your family and other considerations. It's like, I remember watching a video of you when you were just about to become Muslim, and it just looked like you were a little bit uncomfortable, surrounded by Muslims as well. And we spoke about this earlier as well. So how is that initial period where you're kind of like, okay, I need to accept it, but what about this? What about that? What advice would you give to somebody watching right now who's in that situation?
Yeah. I mean, I would say one thing that was introduced to me very early, and it doesn't always compute in your head, but they say that Shaytan does what he can to delay you,
Yeah.
Shaytan comes into your head and says, you need to read the Quran 3 times, you need to do this, you need to do that, and all these things. And a lot of it is Shaytan whispered in your ears. And somebody said that to me, and even though I was kind of like, it's like, really? But something in the back of my mind, I thought that actually makes sense, because my head is playing. And in my head, I was making things a much bigger deal than they were.
Yeah.
I thought my family are going to disown me. I thought that all my friends are going to think I'm off to Syria. I thought I was committing social suicide. When in reality, that's not really what happened. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen to some people, because some people do get disowned. And I'm not downplaying it. But I think in our minds, when before the shahada, we definitely exaggerate things in our head. That it's going to be terrible, and I'm going to lose this, I'm going to lose that, and I'm going to have to change my name was what you start some these other things as well that you start thinking you may have to do. Also, are you ready? Because I think for a non-Muslim, when you're about to take your shahada, you want to be the perfect Muslim. You can't take your shahada and then sin. It's almost you want to be ready for that perfect. In reality, none of us are ready for that. So you've got to take that plunge with knowing that you're not perfect. You are going to struggle, and tests are going to come.
Yeah. And somebody, say, who's been drinking 20 years, or they have previous relationships, and there's all this baggage, they may think to themselves, do you know what? I need to first get rid of this, and this, and then I'll reach that point. But the problem is that point never really begins.
Never comes.
And you sort of, I mean, the example I like to give is that of a marathon, right? So if you try and run the marathon tomorrow, you're going to fail. But if you sign up and then 2 years later and you're training for those 2 years. So when you take your shahada, you sort of enter the race.
Yeah.
And then you can slowly start transitioning out and changing your lifestyle and doing these types of things. But that catch-22, it has to be broken. You have to just say, okay, you know what, I'm just going to just go ahead and take the shahada. Yeah. And sometimes we need a bit of a state change. We need a bit of a psychological mechanism to drive us to move forward. What was it for you? Was it death? Was it just like, I need to be honest with myself and realize it's true? What was that trigger, and how would you get others to have that same sort of thing?
Good question. I think, I was very fortunate to have the ReRooted Dawah guys sort of guide me. And Hamza, you talk about the marathon, he always said to me, a flower doesn't grow in a day. So I already had that. And that's Muslims, reverts aren't always given that advice. You know, it's always, you've got to be perfect. You can't do this 5 times a day. Yeah. That wasn't the advice I received. But I remember Hamza sending me some stuff about death as well. There's some famous stuff on YouTube that sort of talks about, and I think they did because I think you do have to have that perspective that, if you delay your shahada a day, if you die in that time, that's actually quite a serious thing. Yeah. And I definitely was, I was very fortunate, I think, to have the guidance I received.
I think that's also probably because the feedback you got and the advice you got is from people who accepted Islam and they've been through that process and they know selectively what not to accept in terms of advice. Because if say somebody, they have a theoretical understanding of what a Muslim should do when they accept Islam, that's very different to someone who practically understands the culture, practically understands, okay, in this context, this works. In this context, this backfires. Changing the name from Jordan to, I don't know, Umar or something, right? Yeah. It may seem tempting, but it can have repercussions. So how did you not fall into those common sort of things like changing names and wearing thobes as soon as you take the shahada?
That is a good point. And look, I think I've met many robes. I've met many reverts that have taken shahada and they've gone that direction. And many, if it brings them closer to alive, it makes them feel, then I'm fine with that. I think the problem is many people are advised that you have to do it.
Yeah, you have to do it. Yeah.
You have to change your name. You have to look like a Muslim, dress like a Muslim, and I think that kind of advice, a lot of it's out there. I was very fortunate, like you say, to probably have somebody who's like Hamza, who's probably been through a lot of the stuff already and came out the other side. And they were giving me examples of the Prophet, peace be upon him, where he. So I was basically getting authentic sources that I didn't have to do that. Yeah,
I mean, the point which obviously Hamza makes and other brothers make, and which is the classic Islamic position that Muslims have to identify as Muslims. That's of course something that nobody disagrees with. It's just the way you go about and do it, and changing your name. The issue with that is, firstly, it's not something which you absolutely have to do. But what it does do is it makes your parents very upset because it looks like, when you change your name, it's like you change your sort of personality. Also, it's got to do with languages, right? So, if you speak a different language, sometimes it's almost like you have a different personality. So, I think these nuances are very important to understand because, of course, we want to identify as Muslims, we want to follow Islam. But it's just the way you do it. And I think that's why the sort of advice from converts to Islam to other converts to Islam is a lot more easier and more practical than when it comes from a theoretical perspective. Anyway, let's get down to a few questions about, so when somebody accepts Islam, they obviously have to change their lifestyle. They obviously have to go down a transformation journey. Now, the hard thing at the beginning is the idea that I have to pray 5 times a day, right? And I have to do it at a certain time. Some people who accepted Islam, they actually thought you had to pray on the dot. So when it's 12:03, okay, you have to pray on 12:03. Yes. Some people, they got confused about combining prayers and these types of things. What would your advice be right in the beginning when it comes to Salah?
Yeah, and I think this is a very individual thing because I was somebody that worked very long hours. The day after my shahada, I was working a 12-hour day. So and I think what I was advised to do, and I think it's different for different people. I was advised to get Fajr and Isha in, and I started off by those ways, and obviously don't avoid the others. Try and do what you can, and I try to make things up. I think it's a difficult one. It's tailoring it into people's kind of lifestyles, but it's difficult because Islam can't be. I was always told, and I remember Abbas telling me, you can't tailor Islam around your life. Islam, you have your prayers are your priority,
yes.
and everything comes down. Unfortunately, I just wasn't in the position to do that right that moment, but I was moving my life in that direction. Mm-hmm. So I think as long as you're moving in that direction, then I think that's key. But like I say, I've seen examples where people, have a go at a revert because they didn't pray. They take their shahada in the early morning, and because they're not doing Asr. They get
they didn't know.
Yeah. So.
I know of a brother who took shahada, and then because he was around Muslims who weren't really practicing, he simply thought, I just need to pray on Friday. That's it. Yeah. For a long time, he just thought that's all I need to do. So that highlights another issue, which is new Muslim communities, right? So, at the moment, would you say, like being here in London, and I'm sure you've traveled around to many mosques and met many reverts, and quite a few people online as well. Would you say new Muslims generally feel welcome in the born Muslim community, for lack of a better term?
Good question. So me personally, I did feel welcome, and I think I've spoken to various revert brothers. It's probably a deep topic where maybe it depends where you come from in certain circles.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to go to Hamza's Masjid Imam Foundation, where they already had a mixture of people in there. However, I have been to masjids, where I've just sort of gone in to pray and not felt welcome. I remember during Ramadan going into one, everyone went off for iftar, and I was kind of left downstairs. And I don't know if they assumed I wasn't a Muslim or so. There is. I remember once. I'll never forget this. I went into a masjid, and I think it was a Somali masjid, and we were praying, and some guy kicks my leg, so just boots me. So I think, what's he doing? So I boot him back. And at the end, I asked someone else that apparently that's kind of what they do to, avoid the gaps between your bread. And that's their custom, and he didn't mean anything by it. But I think for me, as a revert, it's difficult when you go into these situations and you think, what's going on here?
Yeah, and there's sometimes like usually. There's some hidden rules or certain, reading the air type of things. Okay, so as soon as you pray, okay, everybody knows they need to go upstairs. Okay, you may not have known that, or other sort of things. But there's also, I think, this type of feeling that as humans, we always want to feel in a place that we are welcome. And if there's already a perception about Islam, a negative perception about Islam as a non-Muslim, then you accept Islam. Sometimes that perception can still be there, lurking in the mind. Yeah. So before, when you're a non-Muslim, you're thinking kind of like, okay, Muslims aren't really welcoming people, or they're this or they're that. And then when you accept Islam, and you sometimes, because of the situation, you read the situation like, okay, the same thing's happening. Can that feeling and thoughts and those things come back again?
Yeah, I think so. I think definitely if you are treated badly. I mean, I have to be honest, in my experience of Muslims I meet, and I think, look, when you go to a masjid, you're generally meeting practicing Muslims. Yeah. And I've met so many beautiful people. And I think even going back to the people that, I met originally at Dawah, their beautiful character and the way they treated me, the way I saw them, that had a massive effect on me. And I am someone who is, I would say, intellectual. I look into things, and I wouldn't have accepted Islam just because someone... But it made such a big difference to meet people, a collection of people that, good manners. I saw how they got on. I saw the brotherhood. And it's so important that, and it was kind of like, wow, what are these guys on? And it gave me such a good representation of Islam early on. Whereas I wonder, if I went to Speaker's Corner, say, and I met the wrong Muslim, I may have left the park and maybe not
only that's a good segue to something that you said to me maybe a few months back, which I thought was very interesting. When you came to the park and you accepted Islam, rather than learning the basics of Islam, the creed of Islam, and all these sort of things that you need foundationally as a Muslim, you went into the deep end and all these misconceptions and arguments for and again, and you regretted that. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I accepted Islam, and obviously you're in an environment, and I probably got on YouTube probably too early as well, and you're in an environment where Islam's always being attacked, and So I started I thought my research had to be on defending Islam. I need to talk about the beat the wife first. I need to know all the arguments. I need to know all the arguments about the, kill the non-believers. I need to know all these arguments so I can, explain to people. And really, I was probably neglecting Tawheed, 99 Names of Allah, and that is stuff I did get back onto eventually. But I think a revert, and probably an example is where revert needs that kind of guidance of sticking to the basics, because I'm sure, obviously that's a Speaker's Corner example, but I'm sure other reverts may just start reading the wrong things or go, we tend to run before we can walk. Sort of come in, it's like a kid in the candy shop, you want everything, and you can get very, very, so it's quite important. And like I said, I'm just lucky I've had brothers that have grounded me, and, I do often make dua for people out there to have the same support group network that I had. Because look, I'm 37, I'd say I was a fairly mature adult, and I still found it hard, and I had a good support group. So imagine the young brothers out there or sisters who haven't got the support group, have the wrong guidance, and isolated and everything like that. I think, subhanAllah, it's we need to do more for them.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, like even at a mature age and with the support group, you found it difficult. And imagine the same issue, but you're younger and you don't have the support. And on top of that, you also have this type of and you get this in some parts of the world, less so in the UK, but you do get this sort of thing that when you convert, you've almost become treacherous, right? I remember there was a white revert, a white Muslim, and this was in East London, and somebody walked past and said traitor, right? I remember hearing that. It is almost like you're a traitor to the race type of thing. Did you get that? And did you feel some of that heat?
I did. I got it quite a lot, actually. I got, and probably it's because I was linked to the Speaker's Corner scene. It was very much, I became kind of the stereotypical white convert there.
But you're not ginger.
I'm not. Yeah. So well, these are things. So I wasn't ginger. I didn't come from prison. I wasn't lonely. I didn't struggle to get a girlfriend. There's all these things. These kind of archetypal. Revert that I think a lot of people were confused. Why has this guy accepted Islam? And I was definitely called traitor and all sorts of things. And I still, to this day, I don't really know what I'm a traitor to. I'd love to have that conversation with someone from the EDL or whatever it is, what I'm actually a traitor to. And look, for me, I travelled when I was younger, which I think helped broaden my perspective. And for me, truth is never about the patch of land that you're born on. And I think that's a fairly obvious thing. But I think some people struggle to.
Yeah, it's hard to also, like, as human beings, we don't want to be the odd one out, right? And accepting Islam, especially in the UK at the moment, it does sometimes feel like the odd one out. It's like people are, because obviously conversions are happening, people are accepting Islam. So it's almost like, okay, so there's another one in the family. Okay, this person accepted Islam. So with your family, did you feel that you had to pacify them in some way, or you had to do certain actions, or after becoming Muslim, you had to be an extra good Muslim to, just get them to be more accepting of you accepting Islam? Did you feel that wasn't really needed?
I do, and so my mum had already accepted it with my sister, but I still knew at the bottom of my heart that she didn't really want it for me, and so I delayed telling her, and I did spend time. One thing in Islam which is crucial is spending, looking after your parents, and I didn't spend a lot of time with my mum before that, so I started to see my mum regularly. I started setting up weekly meetings. And I think that did make a difference. Okay. In the end, I didn't tell my mum. My mum found out on YouTube. so
that's a nice way of finding out.
So I think Ali Dawah shared my shahada or something. But
he looks like my son.
And do you know what? She was more upset with the fact that I hadn't told her.
I can imagine
rather than the Islam itself.
So it's like tens of thousands of people know online, but I don't know.
So that was.
That must have been an awkward phone call.
It was very awkward.
Was it a phone call or was it a meeting?
It was a phone call. It was like, something you want to tell me? And I was like, go through all the list of things I might have done wrong.
When was the last time I got nicked? No, it's probably not that.
So,
so that moment where obviously she found out, did you have fear that, oh my God, like, was she going to react like? Or were you kind of like, okay.
Yeah, I think you never want to... You always want to make your parents proud, and I think I always knew. And even now, I think my mum probably, thinks. I think originally she thought it was a phase or something, and then I think she's starting to realise it's not a phase.
It's been a while now.
But yeah, it's. I try my best to. I mean, I don't. Thing is, at the moment, I don't particularly. She's not in good health, but I don't particularly try and push Islam on people around me either.
Mm-hmm.
I try and use my actions and behaviour, and hopefully, if people see, cool, he's Jordan 2.0 now. He's a better version.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think that's the real dawah. Because my mum asked me questions about age of Aisha and all that stuff, but I think that's all kind of. Yeah, I think if I can show her what Islam's done for me, then.
I think it's an important segue that when you show the transformational effect of Islam on yourself, and then you make it more relatable. So, for example, people often speak about how Islam helps them deal with the problem of evil or existential existence. Why do we exist? What's the purpose of existence? A few years ago, and funny enough, you mentioned John Fontaine before, and that he's the first person who spoke to you. So me and him a few years ago, we were traveling around, and we got stopped by the police, and just a few questions, and he obviously noticed that, okay, they're Muslims. So then he obviously wanted to speak to John, and then he said about one of his police colleagues who accepted Islam, and how his accepting of Islam helped him deal with some issues he was going with. So do you think that's because it's very difficult to talk to family and even friends and stuff. Do you think inner peace and how Islam has practical solutions for not only internal happiness, but generally issues that human beings face on a day-to-day basis? Do you think that's a really an easier avenue to sort of speak to people?
I mean, definitely. This is how I came into Islam. I had a niece, and I started to see what Islam was for her. In terms of
because of your sister's acceptance.
Yeah. So I started to see it. So yeah.
And would you say that as new Muslims, that there's a responsibility that you have in teaching people who are looking into Islam, or the new Muslims who are coming? There's almost like an additional burden that perhaps born Muslims don't have, because you've been through all of that, and okay, I know these pitfalls are about to come.
Definitely, and I think it's strange because a lot of people say to me, "Should you be giving dawah? You've only been Muslim a couple of years. Are you the best person?" But I do think, I mean, firstly, that I think I have a certain story that certain people will relate to. And there may be some really knowledgeable Muslims out there that have never actually experienced what I've experienced. And then maybe someone's watching, it could be, an English-born revert who wants to accept Islam. And I think, I don't really see many kind of, say, white faces online in the dawah crowd.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it has to be, but I think
it has an impact on the people of that.
It had an impact on me. So, Hamza, for instance, one of the reasons why I saw Islam as a beautiful thing for my niece. Then I saw it as a beautiful thing, and I think, is it for me as well? I looked at various scholars and all the people online.
Yeah.
It was only when I saw that face that I could relate to, that looked like me a bit. I mean, Hamza don't look like me, but he's he was a guy dressed in sort of sport casuals.
Yeah. He looked like he just came back from
like a
match.
wheeler dealer. Yeah, Islam, and I thought, God, so maybe Islam is an option.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people in this country will see Islam as a foreign religion, even if they see the beauty in it.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a really powerful. It's a powerful image, because you see someone that's like yourself, and then you're like, okay, so if they accepted Islam, it's also for me. John Fontaine actually said something similar, that he saw Abdurrahim Green on YouTube, and he's like, okay, so. Like the same feeling that you got with Hamza. It's like, okay, if it's for him, then it's, it's also. And before that, it was kind of, John said it was like, in his mind, it was just like an Asian religion or something. It was like a race,
yes.
So it's very important to break that stereotype. At the same time, do you think that sometimes Muslims, they, maybe it's, I'm not sure where this exactly comes from, but it's also, okay, so people have now accepted Islam and they came from a particular background, and now the Muslims expect them to be way better than born Muslims. They expect them automatically to be almost leaders and this and that, and they expect you to be really up there.
Yeah, I've always felt that, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I've always thought reverts get way too much credit, because I I mean, a lot of the people that message me, for instance, are born Muslims that say I've inspired them to practice their deen more. And I think, how have I done that? How have I done that? And I think that I've spoken to born Muslims and their challenges and their stories harder than mine. A lot of born Muslims, I've heard of people that have got hit at Quran class or whatever, or they've had bad experiences. They've left Islam, gone to university and then come back. And I think that's an interesting story that I don't hear. Normally it's, the revert telling their story that have come from a different background and accepted Islam. But yeah, and I think there's definitely, you do notice, I sometimes, I've got a little channel, and if I say something and I see people are taking it seriously, I'm always conscious to think, well, actually, I've got to be careful because I've got no, real knowledge. I can't be saying things or making any decisions. So I try and keep my channel for that reason. But I do notice that sometimes if you're, perhaps a white revert on a platform, people can start to listen to you perhaps in that way.
More. Yeah. And there's obviously a danger in that. There's a responsibility. But additionally, there's a powerful avenue you have to get across a point which we were talking about earlier, which is about the slow transformation that a person needs to make when coming. So just to sort of, remind the viewers again, why is it so important for a new Muslim when they accept Islam, and for any potential Muslims out there who are going to accept Islam, that they understand that the slow process, the turtle approach, is better than the rabbit approach? Yeah,
I think, and we spoke about it earlier, didn't we, about the fact that Sahaba were drinking, and it came at a certain time because it's the wisdom that if alcohol would have been banned at a certain time, perhaps they wouldn't have accepted Islam.
Yep.
And I think that's definitely the same case for a revert in terms of pacing yourself, and I think don't expect to be. And this was happening to me. I didn't want to take my shahada. One of the reasons was because I thought I had to be this kind of perfect, or and no sins at all. And we know that's not realistic. And I think, like you said, a flower doesn't grow in a day. And I think you have to keep growing your foundation. And I think, look, a revert, no matter how clever you think you are, and I thought I was clever. I still think I'm a bit clever. But you take your shahada and you're very fragile.
Yeah,
you're very fragile. Even though you believe, and you think, well, Islam is this. You're still, things can jolt you. Things can jolt you off, and you have to be very, very, very wary of that. And I think so. You have to take things as slow as possible.
Yeah. And as someone who's still fairly fresh, I mean, I think you accepted Islam 2 years ago.
2.5 years.
2.5 years ago. And there's obviously a cycle, right? So would you say this, in the world of today, as opposed to say 20 years ago, because everything's on social media and people they sometimes don't look at whether this person, like, where's this information coming from? It's more like, okay, this guy has a lot of subscribers, this person saying this person saying this, and there's sometimes a lot of conflicting information, a lot of stuff which is very, very confusing. So as a last point to end the show, what advice would you give to new Muslims in this very confusing world of social media and the internet and whatnot, to make it easier for them to come to the right sort of guidance, and also to ignore a lot of the noise and figure out what is the right thing to do? Yeah,
no, and you're dead right. And this is one of the things that happened to me. You obviously got YouTube, and so you type in something, a topic, and all these various people come up, and you listen to all of them, and to be honest, there's no one to certify the YouTubers actually know what they're saying. I think for me, definitely linking to an organization early, like EF Dawah. I mean, iERA, I've been on your Dawah training course and stuff like that. So I think linking to an organization and actually going to the basics, Tawheed, 99 names of Allah, and actually doing that first. And because once you've got that foundation, then you'll grow properly. Whereas I think a lot of reverts out there haven't built that, and they're still trying to grow as fast as they can.
Yeah.
And then, so it's, and like I say, reverts, I was amazed how fragile, I'm in a revert group with EF Dawah, and I'm amazed these guys have all had the same support as me. And a lot of them have left Islam, they've embraced Islam and left for various reasons. But essentially they were fragile and weren't able to cope with certain things, and hopefully they'll come back.
And it's a somber point to end upon, but there are people who've left Islam simply because of a lack of social support.
Yeah.
I know of one case where somebody left Islam, and when they were being communicated with, somebody tried to chase them up, and they simply said, well, I'm lonely. I accepted Islam and I lost out. But we don't want to leave people on that note. So how do we make sure that doesn't happen? How do we make sure that new Muslims and people who are potentially looking into accepting Islam, they don't look at this and they say, okay, well, it's too difficult, I'm going to lose my friends. How do they accept Islam in a way that they don't lose out and they take things slowly?
Yeah, I think this is like I say, it's a very individual thing, and I think that I think there's one thing is there's a lot of bad advice out there, and so I think many people are told, because I think, look, you can take your shahada, and I think if your circumstances are that perhaps your family you feel going to disown you, I don't think you have to tell them straight away.
See, that's key, and this is, a lot of people think you have to.
Yeah, and so I think the most important thing is your shahada is your afterlife. That's the thing you have to sort out, and then take time to grow, even if you're. It's difficult because I'm almost telling people to be isolated. I mean, I think you should still be seeking mentors or get in touch with iERA organisations. But yeah, definitely, it should be. I would say the two things I would say that I've noticed are problems for new Muslims is isolation, and also the behaviour of Muslims. Mm-hmm. I think those two things, and I think the way we behave. Is so important, whether it's online, whether it's on just our mannerisms and stuff like that.
And this is an interesting sort of segue, is even if the mannerisms of a Muslim or someone that's on a religious path, because remember, if you're from an atheistic background, then almost all religions are the same, and then slowly you transition off. The type of sincerity that people that people should have in an ideal world is that regardless of how bad someone's mannerisms are or whatever, they still struggle through and carry on. I mean, looking at the story of not only Hamza, but other people who've accepted Islam, they went through, people with bad mannerisms, people with bad behavior, and sometimes getting the wrong information. But I guess that's just part of the test, that you just have to struggle through and just somehow make it on the other side. Because and I said this to someone recently. I said, look, life's a test. You literally go from one test to another. And when you try and shut the door of one test, you're just simply going to walk off into another one. Yeah. You're never going to be in a state of, okay, I'm comfortable, I'm good. And the other thing I was thinking about, and I wanted your thoughts on this to end upon, sometimes being a minority or being a stranger helps you solidify your identity and make you stronger, as opposed to if you were, say, living in a Muslim country where everything was easy. I think a lot of people have actually said it makes you more complacent. And it depends on the type of nature that Allah has created you with. Yeah,
I like that point, because I think many people have said to me, why don't you move to an Islamic country? And when I went to Medina, it was amazing, to pray, you don't even have to think about it, because all the shops are closed, everyone walks to the masjid. Whereas over here, you're kind of like, what's the time? And you have to...
Or else you're in Medina, you're like this, you're in a non-Muslim country, you just lose it all, and these types of things. But as a last point, Jordan, what advice would you give to, say, somebody who is thinking about Islam and they're in this catch-22 situation? They're kind of like, okay, I'm waiting for, a dream, or I'm waiting for flying rabbits, or I'm waiting for something. And even when I become Muslim, I need to have the perfect tajweed. I need to pray 5 times a day, wear the headscarf. Everything needs to happen straight away. What would you advise them?
Yeah. So if if you accept, there's two things. If you accept, if you accept Allah and the Prophet, peace be upon him, as the last and final messenger, you are a Muslim, And I had that feeling where even though I was delaying my shahada, but I was a Muslim. I just hadn't taken my shahada yet. So why delay it, And there are various other things in your mind. And like I said, I mentioned earlier, your mind's going to blow them up. There are various things. And I was told at the time, Shaytan is going to play tricks on you. And I believe that. I think, Shaytan doesn't want your shahada to come. So I think the key is to really understand the importance of the shahada. And then... trust me, everything else in the end will, there's various people say whatever you give up for Allah, he replaces with something better.
SubhanAllah.
And that's true. In every reverts I've spoken to, they've all had tests and challenges. But in the end, they've
Allah doesn't break his promise.
No, 100%.
Thank you so much, Jordan. for all of you watching out there, it is so important that we get this message out to new Muslims, especially. This information is probably going to save people years of going back and forth and making mistakes. So thank you for sharing that advice with us.
Exactly.